And then I would say about half the people use it maybe once a week. And then there's probably 20% that maybe only use it once a month.
That would be me.
Yeah.
Kaiten just says my car's dirty, so she goes to the dealership and gets a new car. That's
honestly.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of the RE Junkies podcast, where we supply your regular fix of all things real estate. Make sure you're the first to get your dose of the RE Junkies podcast by subscribing to this show on your favorite podcasting platform or YouTube. I'm Brooks O'Hearn, joined by my co-host Kaiten Murphy, and today we are joined by a powerhouse, Dan Schiermeyer. Dan, how's it going?
It's going great, guys. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad you are here, Dan. So I know Dan in the Charlotte area. He and I have attended meetups together for, gosh, how long has it been, Dan? You were like one of the first people that came when we started our meetup.
I think it's been 5 years, 2018.
Heck yeah.
Wow.
And here's what's really, really cool about Dan's story is Dan started out working his 9-to-5 job as a manufacturing engineer. He transitioned into residential real estate, and now he owns multiple small commercial businesses. And he's had a really strategic plan this entire time. And it's really cool for me because I've watched the entire journey. But I really think that he breaks his plan now, looking back in hindsight, out really well together. So Dan, I guess let's start with how you got into real estate.
Yeah, so I moved to Charlotte in 2016. I used to work at a big aerospace, big corporate company that moved me all over the country. Realized I didn't really like the big corporate company, at least without trying something different. So took a little quarter life crisis when I was 25 and quit. Took a couple of months off to figure out where I wanted to go. Was looking at different areas in the country. My brother lives in Huntersville, just north of Charlotte, and he worked for a race team. The right place, right time. I came down to visit. Ended up getting a job at a NASCAR team in Charlotte, which was super awesome. So I moved here in 2016, and just from earlier in life, like most people's housing expense is their biggest expense. So I've always tried to live on a cheaper scale. So not most of my paycheck was going to my living. And when I moved here, I started looking at houses to rent, apartments to rent. One of my friends was a realtor. He's like, why don't we go look at houses? And then started looking at what it would cost to actually buy a house. And rent was or a mortgage was like half the price of renting. So it just made sense to buy it. And I had the money saved. So I bought my first house in April 2017. It was just a townhouse, 2-bedroom, 2.5 bath, good location. And it was cheaper to live. And then I found out about BiggerPockets, started listening, ended up getting a roommate. And I guess I found out I was house hacking. So I was only paying.
You house hacked before it was cool.
Yeah. Or before I knew what it was. But then I started listening to BiggerPockets and found out about duplexes. And I was like, I like that concept. Live in one half and rent out the other. So I started looking. There was a company building duplexes in Charlotte. Went and looked at one with my realtor, and they were just getting bought cash. Like people just kept buying them. I didn't even have a chance because I was going to have to deal with an FHA loan, so I didn't have to put as much money down. So I started talking to the builder about trying to build my own, like find a lot of land somewhere north of the city, build one. And then one day my realtor called me. He's like, hey, the builder has one. The buyer backed out. It's already built. It'll be done in 2 weeks. And I was like, sweet. Can we go look at it today? See if they can keep it off the market for a few days. And they agreed. Went and looked at it, put in an offer. I ended up getting it for like $15,000 less because they just wanted to sell it. And they let me go through the FHA process to get the mortgage. So that worked out great. It was a lot at once because I went from having no tenants to having 2 tenants. But I was lucky enough that I was able to get tenants like right away. So never had a vacancy. So I moved into the duplex, ended up getting a roommate there as well. So I was really house hacking, basically lived for 2 years, only having to pay $200 a month to live, which was great.
That's awesome.
And then the plan to start was always like, I'll just keep doing this, buy a house every year or two, move into it, rent out the old one, and build a portfolio. After 2 years of living in the duplex, my roommate moved out, and I kind of got sick of living next to my tenants. And I just wanted a little bit more room. So I started looking around, and this was during COVID, the world shut down. Um, I looked at where I live now, and so I bought another townhouse, and yeah, I moved in May of 2020, and then the commercial real estate thing came up. So
Okay. So at that point, at May of 2020, you have two townhomes and a duplex,
I
and you're
had,
living
yep,
in one of the townhomes.
yep, correct.
Okay, cool. And you're still working full time as a
Yeah,
manufacturing engineer.
yep, still have a full-time job at the race team. So was
Okay.
just doing it on the side and trying to save as much money as I could.
Okay. And were you self-managing all of these properties that you owned at the time?
Yep, yep, did
And
all
how
of
was
it on.
that experience?
Not too bad. I screened all my own tenants, which I think was really positive. So um, I got good tenants. I had a few tenants that uh, ended up moving out short, like they left before the first year was over, which isn't terrible because you keep their security deposit. Um, but nothing really bad. Like had to replace a few washers and go fix a few things, but YouTube, figure it out, or get help. I know enough people that can help me out, so nothing too terrible. And the first townhouse, I've had the same tenant there since I rented it. So
That's awesome. Have you raised
yep,
the rent on there?
a little bit. Like at first I was covering some of the expenses, so I didn't raise rent, but then I transferred expenses to her, so it was kind of a raise. I was getting more cash flow. I've raised rent on the duplex. Like every time somebody moves out, I've been able to raise it, and the tenants that are there have done incremental increases.
Okay. And just so, I mean, this is obviously going to depend on markets, but just so the listeners know, what is your average cash flow on each property?
So the townhouse is the HOA's changed a few times, but it's around 450,
Okay.
and I'm under market value on rent, so it could easily be 600. And then the duplex, I refinanced it last year, so I was able to lower the interest rate. So that's about like right now it's 900, and I think I can get it up to 1100 in cash flow.
Heck yeah.
So
Wow, that's
yeah, the
awesome.
goal there was is to have the rentals cover my mortgage where I live now. So I essentially live for free.
Right. Right. Okay. So let's call it 1500. You're essentially getting cash flow. You were working a 9 to 5. So you obviously still had your salary.
Yeah.
Um, most people I think would look at that and be like, all right, I'm set for life. So what for you was the nope, this isn't enough. And not to say that that's not great, but what was the driving force to kind of continue going forward for you?
Um, I knew I always wanted to keep investing because at one point at the job, I realized like this isn't what I want to do forever. There's not a lot of growth here, and any growth comes with more work. So more responsibility, probably longer hours, more stress. Um, so that's where I was going to start looking into, do I buy more single families or what's the next step? Because I know I don't want to do this job forever. Um, so that was kind of the driver. Like, how do I get out of this? What's the plan? And at the point of buying my last house, I still didn't really have a plan. I just knew I wanted to change something.
That's fair.
That's enough to
That's
make you
fair.
start.
Yep.
Okay, so you're kind of at this point where you're like, okay, I don't want to do this forever. Um, I don't have a plan yet. So I guess tell us kind of about that building journey because I know you to always have a plan. So
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting to hear you say you didn't have a plan. So kind of tell us about that journey to the next property or that plan development.
Yeah. So in 2020, it was literally while I was buying the townhouse that I'm in. My brother is a mechanic for a professional dirt bike rider, and he's known some riders in the past that had invested their extra money into commercial real estate, likely for tax benefits. And like there was a car wash in Cornelius that was up for sale. Right by his work, I drove by it at least once a week. Um, and just from being in real estate and talking about it, like he and other people would ask me questions about real estate, but he's like, how can we buy this thing? Because obviously he doesn't want to work forever either. So we're trying to figure out something that we could start together. So we inherited a house in Vermont where we grew up. just completely paid off. So we started looking at it, and I was like, the only way we could do this is do a cash out refinance, and then we could buy it. So we're like, all right, it could be possible. And then one day I was like, all right, well, let's actually take a look at it. So I called the broker. There was a sign on the side of the road, called the number. And this was probably April of 2020 when we first started looking at it. And I was like, hey, me and my brother are interested in buying this. They have never done anything commercial. I have some residential experience. This is how we'd get the money. We both have good credit. Like, is it even possible? And he's like, yeah, that sounds like you could do it. I'll put you in touch with a lender. Talk to the lender, and they're like, yeah, we think we could approve that. And then the next step was talking to the buyers. So we talked to the sellers. We talked to them, had just a conference call, and was like, what's it take to run a car wash? So it's a self-service car wash with an automated, and there's no employees. So they kind of ran through it. They both still had full-time jobs, so they were doing it on the side. So we're like, all right, cool, because we were both still working. We think we can handle this on the side. So got farther into it. They actually met us there and showed us all the equipment, and we're like, none of this looks that foreign. The financial statements looked good. It was making money as is. With the debt that we could get on it would be covered by how it was currently running and cover the cash out refinance mortgage that we were taking out. So we put in an offer and it got accepted. I think we got a good price because it was during COVID. Yeah, and we just saw a lot of room for improvement. So it was a lot to do at once, like trying to do cash out refi to get a commercial loan, a lot of money up on the line. And then everything took longer because it was COVID. It was hard to get an appraisal and everything. So the closing kept getting pushed, and you had to put more money down. So it was getting a little nerve wracking, but it was once we closed, it's been a great experience since.
That's awesome. Can you dive a little deeper into the due diligence of the actual, like, the business and the real estate? You said you had some conversations with the sellers, and in typical young person fashion, you took a quick look at it and said, yeah, this doesn't look too foreign. We're good.
Yeah.
What take us a level deeper on the due diligence, because buying a business is way different than just buying commercial property. And I know they can, a lot of people say, like, hey, small apartment buildings are they're basically like small businesses. But buying a car wash or something like that, you got to take it a few levels deeper. So
yeah. So yeah, when you buy a commercial business, it's like rentals. You're kind of doing the same thing when you're looking at a single family. Like, what's it cost? What's the mortgage going to be? What are the expenses? HOA, management fee, all that. It's like a basic P&L. So with the business, it's a more in-depth P&L. You're looking at where the income's coming from. What are the expenses to run the business? And with car washes, like, what are the chemicals? What are the repairs? So we really dove into that. And then we had questions like, hey, why were your repairs $10,000 more last year versus this year? What is the breakdown of the income? Like, was it coming from the bays? Is it coming from the vacuums? Is it coming from the automated? And luckily the sellers had good financial statements. So and they had all the records to back it up. Like, they had some vandalism that happened, and they had all the records from that. So that's why some of the income was there. And then when you're looking at a financial statement too, a lot of people, for their benefit, write things off. So when you're looking at it, you're like, oh, I don't need to spend $2,000 on going out to eat a year. I can probably change it to do better. Oh, you spend no money on marketing. There's room for improvement. Looking at like Google Business and like social media, there wasn't much activity there. So those were things that we saw for improvement, but just the way that they were running it now, it was still cash flowing, and it would, as long as it continued as it was running, we could keep it. It would pay the bills, and then we would have an asset that we would at least pay down the equity in, or pay down the mortgage in and get principal payments. So that's where we're like, we got to make the move. And then also the area, like, where is it located? We're on a busy road. There's lots of developments that were already approved. So like going to the town site, seeing what projects are in the pipeline, those types of things. So we know the area is only going to expand. So that means the land's going to be more expensive in the future. And then there was a lot of things that we kind of lucked out along the way. Like Cornelius won't let any more car washes be built, which we didn't.
Oh,
That's not the thing that I looked at, but that's something that I learned when looking at other car washes in the future. Like I've looked at other ones, and you see that there's one being built right down the street, and you're like, all right, well, that's not that as appealing anymore because that's a business that's national, and they're probably just going to steal a bunch of the customers.
yeah, absolutely. So you're pretty much locked in. I mean, unless something happens and the city decides to change their mind on that law, right? I
Yeah,
mean, your competition is you've got all the competition you can have right now.
yeah, pretty much. And even if they were to change it, it probably wouldn't be on our side of town. So we'd probably still, the amount of people that live on that side of 77 is only going to increase. So I don't think they would allow like a big tunnel, like a Sam's Club or something, to be built on that side. There's already one on the other side. So I think it's kind of
That's
limited.
awesome.
Yeah.
For
That's
reference,
awesome. Was there
77
anything?
Go ahead.
Sorry, Kate, go ahead.
I was going to say, for reference, 77 is like a major, one of our major highways that kind of splits Cornelius and Huntersville in half.
Yeah.
For people who are not familiar with the area.
Perfect. I picked up on that, I guess, but yeah, good call. I've been in the area quite a few times. My next question was going to be, other than you mentioned Google, and there was hardly any online presence for this car wash, like no reviews, no marketing, and obviously that's an easy way to expand revenue. Was there anything else that you guys identified within that process of buying that car wash that you said, hey, that's something we can capitalize on to add revenue or decrease expenses?
Yeah, another one was the automated prices were low compared to the area, so like we saw room for improvement there. And then the sellers had all the traffic counts, so you could basically add, if I up the top wash by $2, you could see what the increased revenue would be if the traffic stayed the same. So, and then that tied with marketing and hopefully being able to increase a little bit. Like, okay, there's room for improvement. And then the same thing with like expenses. Like my brother's a mechanic. I went to school for engineering. So a lot of the problems that we've had because we operated ourselves, we've been able to fix ourselves. So instead of having to call a technician to come out and look at it and get paid a day rate and a travel fee, we can avoid that ourselves by fixing it ourselves. So we've saved a lot there as well.
I love it.
Dan, something I really, really respect about you is you're not afraid to ask for help. And something that stuck out to me that you said is you got on the phone with the sellers and you're like, what's it take to run a car wash? And
Yeah.
some people might look at that and be like, ooh, I don't want to ask that because that might like decrease my credibility to them or something like that. But you're like, let's lay it out on the table. What's it take? So you use them as a resource, and then you had some knowledge from the broker and the lender and stuff like that. What other resources did you kind of lean on for pieces that you didn't necessarily know or you hadn't done yet during your due diligence process?
So it's funny. Some people say like, talk about what you're doing. Like if you want to get into real estate, you start talking about it. So I started talking about it, and come to find out, one of my coworkers, his dad's owned a car wash for 20 years and been in the industry. Another friend, he owns a car wash in Statesville. So I called these people, was able to have a quick conversation with them, tell them what we were buying, what we were doing, and they just became a good resource. Like, it's good industry. These are rooms for improvement. These are the things you can do. So just having some people that are already in the business, and then after that, there's car wash forums, like Bigger Pockets forums. There's strictly just car wash forums that you can ask questions on. So tons of information out there.
Nice. Nice. I love that. So when you bought it, it was cash flowing what? And then since you've done it, because you've made other improvements too, besides just marketing and things like that.
Yep.
So if you want to talk about those a little bit, and then where you're at now as far as cash flow goes, since you've done those improvements.
Yeah. So when we got it, it was probably like the goal was that it could cash flow like $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Once we got it stabilized and made some of the improvements we wanted to do, like like change some signs and just some little things to fix, make sure everything's operating properly. And right now, I just did the financial statements the other day. We're on track to double our sales for the year and double our net operating income.
Heck
So
yeah.
we've already done this year what we did last year in 8 months. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that.
That's amazing. And you implemented a membership, right?
Yep.
I was
Yeah.
just going to ask about this.
Yeah. So a lot of the equipment there is older. A lot of the car wash equipment's built to last a long time, especially for the self-service where you go in and wash yourself. But our automated was old. We were having some issues with it, finding out that it was harder to get parts for. So our business, it was built in 2007. So all the equipment was from 2007. And just from being in the industry and some of the improvements we made, we met a distributor that sold new automated washes. And we had lunch with them and like kind of started to look at what it would cost to replace the whole thing. And with the development in the area, like there's an apartment complex being built, a massive new rec center. We're like, we're gonna have to make this expensive in the next 2 to 3 years anyway. Let's just do it now so that we have a better product for our customers. So people that come like the experience better. And then we'd always been looking at the membership program, but with our old equipment, it was kind of a pain. Like we couldn't trust that it wouldn't trip, we wouldn't catch it. So we didn't want people to sign up and then say this place sucks. So we waited till we got the new equipment, and we basically opened the new wash and implemented the membership program at the same time. And the memberships program is nice because people like it because they can wash their car more and it costs them less. But we like it because it's recurring revenue.
Absolutely. So I'm curious. I mean, obviously, the predictability of the revenue is clutch for a business, and on that recurring. But do you find that people use the value of their membership? Because I've often felt like I love my car wash membership, and I would never go to a car wash without a membership. But there are a lot of times where I try to compute in my head. I'm like, am I going enough to get my value right? But I love the convenience, and I'm not going to take it off as the customer, but from the business owner perspective.
Yeah, there's probably like 10% that use it that we're probably not making a ton of money on because they come a couple times a week.
I was going to say those people that are there like 2 days, every 2 days.
Yeah. And then I would say about half the people use it where you're still making money. So they use it maybe once a week. And then there's probably 20% that maybe only use it once a month.
That would be
Love
me.
that.
Yeah.
Kaiten just says my car's dirty, so she goes to the dealership and gets a new car. That's
honestly. Honestly, it's easier. Much more fun.
Yeah.
Okay, this is all really great. So looking back to the beginning of the journey of acquiring the car wash, buying the car wash, what were some big learning lessons? What would you have done differently? Some big like aha moments in the process.
So getting the loan was definitely a learning process. We went the SBA route, just Small Business Association. So that process is a little more in depth. It's kind of like getting an FHA loan for a residential. They want a little bit more paperwork. They want to validate everything. So it was a long process, a lot of paperwork. But in reality, like none of it was that difficult. It was just staying on top of all the things that needed to be done and making sure you get it to the bank quickly so that everything can continue to move. I probably would have reached out to more lenders at first, just to see what they would require. And then also just learned what like SBA lenders are looking for, especially because this was our first business. We had to put up a little bit more collateral because it's our first time buying a commercial business. But also learned about the fees and everything that's included in an SBA loan. So different things to factor in when you're doing like just evaluating a property before you even put an offer in. But yeah, once we got through it, it was a little bit harder, but it wasn't that much more difficult than buying a single family house.
Words of encouragement.
Yeah.
So you mean
Can
to tell me that when I see all these like TikTok and Instagram reels of people buying laundromats and car washes and self storages and all these other businesses, that when they say you just put 10% down and the SBA finances the rest and it's easy as pie, like you mean to tell me that's not true?
I mean,
he's
yeah,
like, it's
it
not true.
definitely takes work. But yeah, I mean, the fact that you can only put 10% down on a business is pretty awesome.
It is incredible.
And especially for your first one, like, yeah, I forget what our down payment was. It was probably close to $100,000. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome that that's an opportunity for you to get in business. Is it the best type of financing? Not really, but if you find a business that's you can add value to, that there's a lot of improvement, it's great, and then you can refinance in the future. So it's a great way to be able to take the step to get into commercial.
Yeah, like you said, just like an FHA loan for
Yeah,
the residential. Yeah,
yeah.
perfect.
Perfect. Okay, so you also own another commercial business. So let's pivot into how you got that, what it is, how you got that one, and we'll dive into that.
Okay. So we closed on our car wash in September 2020. About a week after we closed, the same broker that I talked to buy the car wash sent me a self-storage facility. He's like, "Hey, you know anybody that would want to buy this?" I was like, "Maybe the sellers that just sold us the car wash," but I was like, "We can't do that right now." And then we were figuring out how to run the car wash. A couple months later, listened to a podcast with AJ Osborne on Bigger Pockets. Heard about the self-storage thing, and I was like, man, that sounds great. Sounds like less work, and if you can find a good deal, like they can cash flow well. So I reached back out to the same broker and asked if it was still available. Started looking into it, and just doing the numbers, I was like, wow, this is really under market value. Like there's a lot of value add we could do to this property. So trying to figure out how we could purchase it. The SBA lender made us have a lot of money in reserves because it's our first business. There's a lot of equipment for the car wash. We didn't know this when we were buying it, but part of the CARES Act is we didn't have to pay a mortgage payment for the first 6 months. We were just forgiven as part of the CARES Act. So we had more cash than we needed sitting in our bank account. And then we both still had other savings. So we started looking into the storage and we're like, I think we could do this on our own. And same thing, I called a lender that specialized in self-storage. They did SBA loans for self-storage. Called them and was like, hey, I just bought a business and got a big mortgage. I was like, can I even buy another business or is that not even allowed? And he's like, no, you can get up to $5 million in SBA loans. I was like, wow, I got a good runway. So we started evaluating that deal in November of 2020. So just a couple months after we closed, went under contract the first time right around Christmas of that year. Then once we got all the financials, we had to pull out because the owner, the financials didn't match or his tax returns didn't match the financials that we were given. So we did some negotiations, went back and forth. Actually was able to get the lender to come out and he met with the owner and kind of talked to him about how self-storage was valued. And then we were able to agree upon a price. And then we were able to take that one over as well. And that one was, we did a lot of research online, listened to a lot of podcasts. I read a couple books that are out there, and yeah, it didn't seem as complicated as the car wash. There was a lot of work involved in the first few months, but on a daily, you don't have to go up there every day. And the other thing that I like about both businesses and what kind of intrigues me in them now is if something breaks, it's not the end of the world. Like if the automated wash goes down, if I don't get there for couple hours or even a day, it's not the end of the world. And same with storage. Is somebody moves out and I can't go fix a broken door, I might lose 20, 30 bucks if it takes me a few days to get up there and fix it. So I like that you don't have to react like right away unless there's like a really major problem, but that can happen in a residential house too.
That's true. So how many units is the mini storage?
It's 136. It was 136 when we bought it. We converted an old unit that was like an office when it was first built into 2 more units. And then our office space it was it was pretty large, and we're not there every day. So we were able to put up a wall and put another door to the bathroom. So we rent out an office space as well. And then we have land for improvement. So we're actually working on doing an outdoor parking for like RVs and boats and trailers and things like that.
Nice. I love it. And if I remember correctly, this guy that you bought it from was very old school, right?
Yes, yeah, that was another intriguing factor on it is that so he was very under market value, hadn't raised rents in a long time, but he was pen and paper. He had good records, but everything was on pen and paper. So I spent a lot of time transferring paper records into Excel so I could send them to the bank.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, that was it was work, but it was totally worth it.
Okay. And so they were under market rate by how much? Do you remember how much?
At least 40%.
Okay. Wow. So in the process, I assume when you guys took over ownership, you raised the rates.
Yep.
How did that go?
So when we took it over, the first step was getting everybody into a management software. So one of the nice things with storage is we have a management software that we can look at it from computer wherever we're at and see who's paid and who hasn't. So we had to get everybody into that system, and then immediately, like day one, any units that were empty, we raised those to market value, just comparing what other facilities were in the area. We waited a few months before we did our first rental raise. Basically raised everyone to a fair price. It wasn't market value. Basically kind of like halfway between what they were paying and what market value was. And then we did it again 6 months later. And it was, some people complained they'd been there forever and never got a rental raise. We got some nasty emails, like, how could you do this? But those people are still there. They never moved out.
I was just gonna say, what was your actual turnover though?
Yeah, no, we had a couple people consolidate, like they had multiple units and they consolidated into one. But we probably only had less than 10% move out at that time. Some people have moved out since they realized they just had a bunch of junk. They didn't need it, but nobody like immediately. Probably only 10% of the people moved out right away.
Imagine that. You pay fair prices and you're finally like, wait a second, I don't need this junk.
I was
Yeah.
just about to say that. Okay. So what other did you do any other improvements? You added a property management software. You obviously added or increased rent. Did you do any other improvements to it?
Nothing major. Raising the rents, having the management software. We tied our gate. We had an automatic gate, so we tied that to our management software. So basically, when people don't pay, the management software just automatically takes away their gate code, so they can't get into the facility. They can still get in if they tailgate behind another car, but we still overlock them so they can't get into their units. There's these type of locks that when you overlock, it's got a combination on it with a serial number. So we can go overlock, and if somebody goes before we get up there to take them off, we can just send them the code and they drop the lock through a Dropbox. So that avoids us having to go up there as much. And then we got people on adding the management software, allowed people to pay with credit cards. So about 50% of our tenants pay on the first of the month with a credit card draft, which is great. And then we also moved our mailing address to a PO box that's closer to us because the facility is about 25 minutes north of where I live and 45 for my brother. So we tried to avoid having to go up there as much.
So how much time a week or a month do you spend on each of the two commercial businesses at this point?
Storage is probably only maybe an hour or two a week. It's a little bit more at the end of the month, the beginning of the month when payments start coming in. And then the middle of the month if there's any auctions you have to do. But it's only really a couple hours a week, maybe during the week if there's nothing really. It's a couple minutes a day just looking at the management software. If there's no messages or anything, then it could only be 10 minutes a day. The car wash, I review it more. Like I have my security cameras right here so I can see what's going on site. So I'm looking over it more. When it's busy, we try to go by once or twice a day, but I can go by in the morning. My brother goes by in the evening, or we have a family friend that can go by for us if we're busy. But there's a lot more transactions with the car wash. So the accounting side, which I still do all of that right now, takes a little bit more. So it's probably a couple hours a month on that.
Okay.
And then everything else is like extra, like trying to do marketing to get more members. That's all not required, but it's stuff I spend time on right now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. So going into your second commercial deal, obviously you knew a lot more going into it. Did you have any big learning lessons? Was anything super different, or because you had gone through the process of the car wash, I don't want to say it was a breeze, but it was much simpler than the first one.
Yeah, it was a lot easier. We did find a bank that specialized in self-storage, so they knew the asset already. We found out that storage is more bankable than a car wash. They they appraise more on the profit and loss statement than the car wash does. Like the car wash, they're really looking at the building equipment, real estate, and not as much on your financials because it's a service business, I guess. Whereas uh, storage, because you have tenants and if you have a track record of being full, they take that more into account. So they're also looking at the real estate, but it goes more off of what the business can bring in. But because we had just done all the stuff for the other business, we kind of had a lot of the paperwork already ready. So it was a lot easier to get the bank what they needed. And then because we went under contract and then had to pull out, the bank already had everything from us. So we really only had to update a few things. So storage was a lot easier. And then we lucked out that it appraised higher, so we didn't have to put any collateral down. So everything went smoother. And then also the seller he was can't say he was easy to work with, but once we got to the sale price and we're under contract, he was super helpful. Was able to give us whatever we needed. So
Nice.
So that second purchase of self-storage, I heard you say you went through a bank that was more self-storage friendly. So that's not SBA on the second one,
no,
correct?
no, it's an SBA loan as well.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I was gonna ask. So okay. So you've got and then the appraisal you covered your additional equity without having to put the down payment down. Then my question would be, would you would you do a deal with a regular bank or stick with SBA for whatever your third commercial business is?
So it'll depend on the asset and the price. Like with the SBA, if the debt makes sense, that I could purchase a $3 million business instead of a $1.5 million business, I would potentially do the bigger one with an SBA loan because I know that I could have less down, have a bigger asset, and then if there's the same room for improvement, you can create way more equity um, than just buying a business that you have to put 20% down because then you tie up more cash um, in an asset that there might not be as much room for improvement.
That makes sense.
So I would look at it both ways. It really depends on the size of the asset and the amount of money I have to put down.
Okay. Can you do a quick high level comparison between traditional bank and SBA just for the listeners who might be like, okay, this is opening my eyes. Quick back of the napkin, like percent down, typical difference in interest rates, maybe your length of your loan, and anything else that really comes into play with the two loans.
Yep. So with the SBA, there's one that you can do with 10% down. You can typically amortize it 20 to 25 years is what the business loan. They usually like to do 20, but you can usually get 25 years. Interest rates are a little bit higher on an SBA loan. So I think our first one was actually at 6%, but then the storage we did after was 5.25. And then a regular bank, they're usually looking for 25 to 30% down. So 70% loan to value. I think it's kind of gone down to like 65% loan to value now. And then the other thing with the SBA is there are more upfront fees. So you have to pay 2.75% to get a SBA loan. So it's another big chunk up front, which gets wrapped up into the mortgage, but still it's more money down or makes your mortgage higher. And then I think regular banks is more of like a 1 point. So it's not as much money to get the debt. And then the other thing is with an SBA loan, there's prepayment penalties. So if you pay the loan back in the first year, you pay 5% penalty. You pay it back in the second year, it's 3%. If you pay it back in the third year, it's 1%. So you have to take that into account for what your plan is. Like if you're going to try to refinance in a year or two, you may want to try to get a conventional loan, or you have to calculate that in that you're going to have to pay that fee.
Yeah. You throw that money right away, or you better calculate it into your equity.
Yep. Like we actually refinanced our car wash and paid the 3% fee, but for us it was worth it because we were able to lower our interest rate, so that dropped the payment. And then we had collateral tied up in the car wash loan, so one of my rental properties and my brother's house. So we wanted to free that up. So for us, it was worth it to pay the fee, which just got wrapped up in the mortgage or the new mortgage, but now it gives us more leverage that we can do more stuff in the future sooner.
But yeah, get that burden off your shoulders. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that comparison.
Absolutely. So Dan, for someone who's wanting to kind of like take their first step into commercial real estate, what would you suggest they do or study or learn?
Yeah. I'd definitely get used to looking at financial statements for whatever type of business you're looking at. Like you can go on Crexy or Biz Buy Sell and like find a couple businesses, whatever it is, even if it's a car wash, and just try to get some financials and look at it just to see if you understand it and make sure you can get comfortable with it, where the money's going. And then if it's not your specialty, if it's something you're trying to do on your own or with a partner, maybe find that partner and see. Like my brother and I work great together because I do more of the admin and financial stuff, and he's really good at operations. So finding somebody that doesn't have the same skill set as you, so that you can work together. Those are 2 places I'd probably start.
Okay.
And then also learning about how businesses are valued, like looking at cap rate and seeing where their value add is.
I love that. That's great advice.
Yeah.
A little bit different than evaluating a single family residence, kind of, not really.
Yeah, that's the great thing with commercial, and that's kind of what I realized after I got into these first 2. It's like I'm basically doing the Burr method, but with commercial businesses, where buy it, make it run better, increase the NOI, which creates more value in it. So it's forced appreciation instead of looking at markets and thinking there will be appreciation. So that's the fun part about commercials. You can kind of calculate what you're going to be able to do.
Yeah, it's a little more predictable, a little more controllable.
Yep.
So what type of business do you have your eye on for your third, or have you even thought about it yet?
Yeah, I've always been evaluating. I would like to acquire more storage because it's more scalable. Like I could ideally buy similar size facility to what I have, up to double the size, and still keep it as like without a full-time manager on site. But then you could basically set the operations up exactly the same, and then I could have one person that could look over multiple sites. So that's the appeal to storage. Car washes, I do enjoy. The cash flow is great, but they do require more work. So if I was looking at one, it would have to be something that's local, or that I could calculate in the price of being able to pay somebody to go fix hoses and take the trash out and things like that. Because the longer term goal is to not be involved in the day to day, is to be looking at acquiring more businesses.
And Dan, you left your full-time job when?
July 1st. So it never really, the goal is always to figure out how to make my passive income, or the income that I control on the side, create or be greater than my expenses. And once we got the car wash stabilized and storage, I realized that I had hit that number. So I was kind of waiting for a few things, and I wanted to leave my job in a good place. I wanted to leave on good terms. So the date did get pushed a few times, but I realized that I was at that point, and if I had that 50 hours back a week, and if I look back at what I done in the previous 18 months on the side, I figured that I would probably be all right to figure more out. And it's been great.
Absolutely. And do you have a timeline or I guess a timeline in mind of when you want to acquire your next property, or just, when the numbers make sense and you find the next right property?
Yeah, I would love to close on another one before the end of the year if I can find the right deal. I'm in the process of selling my first townhouse, so I would like to try to 1031 the money from that into another deal. So that kind of just came into fruition last week that I was selling that. So I'm going to start actively looking here and reaching out to brokers and telling them what size I'm looking for. So trying to see if I can make that happen. And even if I don't close before the end of the year, it'd be good to get something under contract.
I love that. What's the typical timeline for a business sale? Because you've got residential real estate, which is typically 14 to 30 days, depending on your type of transaction. Then you got commercial real estate, which is generally like 60 to 90 days in my experience. And then what about business?
Yeah, so I've seen anywhere from 45 to 90 days. Our first
Okay.
one was about 90 days, and a lot of that was due to the COVID. Like our appraisal was a month out when we ordered it, so like you can't really control that.
Sure.
But the car wash, because we had already done the financing stuff up front, which is a good thing. Like if you start talking to banks when you have ideas and can get ahead of the curve a little bit, you get all that out of the way. So we went under contract at a 60-day close, and we closed. We had to push it 1 week because of the attorneys, but so it was only 1 week late. So
Damn attorneys.
Perfect. All right. Well, this has been super, super insightful. Thank you so much. We have one more round that we're going to go into. This is our lightning round. You got no prep on this, and we're just going to ask you a few random questions. First thing that comes to mind, we'll have some fun. So my first question for you is, if someone gave you $1 million to spend on real estate, how would you spend it?
storage.
On or in real estate?
I would try to buy. I mean, with $1 million, I could potentially buy a $5 million storage facility. So I would try to either go big, or I would try to buy multiple small ones to build a portfolio.
I don't even think you took a breath before you answered that question.
Yeah, I didn't even finish the question.
Well, you talk about a man with a plan. Like I was like, storage, done.
Yep. It's kind of been asked before, and the thought is like, hey, if I sold both my businesses right now, how much money would I have? What would I do with it? So I'm not going to sell my businesses because they're great for right now, but I've definitely had the thought.
Yeah, it's always a nice visualization. Dan, when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I kind of forgot, but I probably want to be a pilot. My dad was a private pilot, so I got to grow up flying around in private jets and flew all the time. My parents are born and raised in Germany, so growing up, I went to Germany every year. So I like the fact of being able to fly a plane. Now I just jump out of them, but
Now I just jumped out of them. Casual.
at some point, I'll get my pilot's license. I don't like to do things like partially, so I've just been waiting till I had the monies that I can just go through it, and that becomes my kind of job on the side.
Go all in. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that plan is already formulating in your mind.
For sure.
If you could retire tomorrow, what would you do? All, financial things taken care of. How would you spend your time?
Traveling the world, probably helping other people get there. I mean, I'm kind of retired right now. I enjoy what I do. It's the first level retirement. Spend more time with myself, like make sure I'm in good physical condition, take care of my health, and then try to teach that to other people and help other people get to that point.
I love it. If you could sit on a bench and chat with someone for 1 hour, who would it be?
Ooh, it's a tough one. Maybe like Elon Musk. Some of these, I like all the things he does. I don't know how he functions operating like a bunch of billion-dollar companies.
Well, first off, he's not human. So
yeah. Yeah, I right now it'd probably be Elon Musk. If I had more time to think, it'd probably be somebody from history.
Okay.
Well, we haven't gotten that one yet, actually. So I love that answer.
Nice.
Okay, my last question in this round for you is, what is your all-time favorite real estate or business book?
I mean, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first one that I read, but I think that's more of like a mindset shift.
Mhm.
I just read Finding Your Edge in Commercial Real Estate,
Hmm.
and I really enjoyed that
Ooh.
one.
Who's that by?
Jeremiah Boucher. Um,
Look it up.
I really liked it because he kind of goes into like the different seasons of real estate investing. Like at first, you're grinding, doing everything you can, and then you finally build up some equity, and you can maybe start to do bigger things and build the team, and then you can kind of remove yourself and let your company run, and you just oversee it, and then whatever you want to do afterwards, when you have more money than you need, you can give back to communities. Um, but also goes into like the right mindset you have to grow and making sure you're taking care of yourself along the way, not just working.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm definitely gonna check that book out. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah, I heard it on a podcast somewhere and bought it, and I just finished it last week, so I liked it.
Well,
Awesome.
thank you for passing it along on our podcast.
No problem.
Okay, my final question of the day for you is, if you lost everything except your knowledge, what would you do in the first 30 days to close the deal?
I would probably attend every real estate meetup, get online and try to meet people, and probably try to get equity in a deal on operations and being able to do it from knowledge, or try to approach owners with like an owner finance type deal. So something that you can potentially get with no or low money down, um, or just try to build some creative offer that would let me get into the business.
I love that. And you're someone who does attend meetups very regularly, even though you are first level retirement. But I think that people don't understand how valuable meetups can be, not necessarily for the content that the speaker is sharing. I mean, that's great too, but for the connections and the relationships that you build networking with other, investors or real estate professionals in your area. So, um, Bigger Pockets is a great resource for finding meetups, meetup.com. Do you guys have any others?
I would say Facebook. There's Facebook groups on real estate as well, and I've seen some meetups pop up off of that. So find your local real estate group on Facebook. And
I'm so glad you said local. I'm so glad you said local.
yeah,
I have left pretty much every national or international group that has, I mean, especially the ones with hundreds of thousands of members. I'm like,
yeah,
this is useless. It's
yeah,
absolutely useless.
yeah. I
Local.
turn
Get
notifications off.
local.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and local's great because then you meet the people in the area that are potentially doing what you want to, and even if they don't have any value to you right then and there, you might meet somebody else at the next meetup, and that person's not there, and then you can connect them. I've gotten so much value out of going to them. Yeah, and then the other part of it is too is you get yourself out there. Like even if you haven't done a deal and you go and you're trying to, you learn people that have done literally the same thing you have, which I think can just help your mindset as well. Like know that it's possible. Like, oh, there's other people in the same situation and they're actually doing this as well. How'd you do that? So
It's perfect.
I love it.
And guys, check the show notes to connect with Dan on Facebook or Instagram. He shares all things real estate, skydiving, travel. He is a lot of fun to follow. So make sure you check the show notes for those profile links as well.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening to us today. Thank you, Dan, for joining us. If you like this week's dose of the RE Junkies podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Or if you have a crazy real estate story or a great case study, click the submission link in the show notes to be featured in a future episode. Submissions can remain anonymous if you want. We'll catch you junkies next time on the only real estate podcast of its kind.